Ter Rorschach turned his mech, a rare Nova, one of two presently on Ironhold, and fired a cluster of LRMs from the right arm rack that replaced the mech's usual medium lasers. The long-range missiles would surprise the executioner because a Nova was not usually equipped with them. The missile's flight was true, their arc high to make up for the relatively short distance, and the missiles coming in at an odd angle that apparently the executioner pilot did not detect in time. The other mech was already reeling from the concentrated attack by Joanna's left arm laser, whose large pulses were making an asymmetric tattoo on its chest. For years, I taught students that the foundation of a persuasive essay is a compelling thesis statement. After racking my brain for a while, I think I have the perfect thesis for this video on the Nova. It may lack the artistic flair of Henry David Thoreau and the rhetorical bite of Cicero, but I do the best with the brain I have. Here we go. The Nova demonstrates that Clan Hell's Horses isn't entirely a nonsense clan. The script here says I should add a dramatic pause to let that sink in. The story of the Nova, the well-known clan invasion era 50-ton clan Omnimech, begins on a planet named Tasha, deep in the clan homeworlds. The first to settle this marginally inhabitable world were colonists from Clan Mongoose who set down foundations in 2840. The planet had a thick, oxygen-rich atmosphere which promoted the growth of native and non-native flora and fauna, but it was actually poisonous to humans in all but the highest of altitudes. Excessive oxygen consumption causes hyperoxia, which has symptoms including but not limited to lung cell damage, neurological issues, and retinal detachment. That sounds like fun. So while the planet could be useful to humans, especially in those resource-rich valleys, any people sent down out of the mountains were sure to carry respirators. It wasn't long before the other clans learned of the available resources on Tasha, and they came knocking. After a rough going and continued clashes with the Smoke Jaguars and Star Adders, Clan Mongoose's settlers were eventually booted completely off the planet by Clan Jade Falcon in 2851. In the decades that followed, various clans squabbled over territory among the mountain settlements and valley mining operations. One of the major players in that constantly shifting game of resource allocation was Clan Hell's Horses. When Clan Coyote's Omnimech technology hit the scene, there was a mad rush by all the other clans to procure it and make their own modular battlemechs. Clan Hell's Horses stood in an advantageous position as they were able to obtain the Omnimech technology and already had played a crucial role in the research and production of their first battle armor. The combination of these technologies would have a big impact on later history. When looking for a location to produce their new Omnimech, Tasha was a good candidate as it was close to several key resources necessary for the process, which was shorten logistics lines. While the Science Cast members worked on their design for the new Omnimech, the foundation for the Tasha Mechworks was poured. By 2921, the Alpha facility would be Clan Hell's Horses' largest mech production line. It produced more than a half dozen different mech designs and the components used in more than a dozen others. Long before that, however, it all started with the Nova. By the time the 50-ton Omnimech's design was finalized, its mission was to be an extremely capable jack-of-all-trades battlemech which could be tailored to a wide variety of battlefield roles. Its Star League XTA frame and 250XL model SF2 Fusion engine were sturdy and allowed the mech to travel at up to 86 km per hour. With its high cockpit, low-slung arms, and shoulder-height mounted legs, the Nova was unique among its other Omnimech peers. With 5 hard-mounted Clan Standard Type A2 jump jets, the movement profile was set at 585 before any other supplemental pod equipment. It also was given 14 double heat sinks to hopefully tackle any heat issues, though we will see with the primary configuration that more would be needed. So many more. The Nova was protected by 10 tons of standard Forge Type HH30 armor plate, which was just 1 ton less than the max possible. For comparison, the Centurion 9A was protected by 8.5 tons of armor, and the Night Sky 4S carried 9.5. With gyro and cockpit factored in, this left 16 tons of pod space available for weapons and additional equipment. However, before we launch into the standard configurations, we do need to talk about one of my favorite features of the Nova and the other clan Omnimechs. The Hell's Horses, better than some of the other clans, understood that the future of warfare was with mixed arms. Designing the Nova in such a way that it could easily transport battle-armored infantry was of high importance. When the time came for Operation Revival, many Inner Sphere defenders saw their first Nova accompanied by a point of elementals, ready to leap from the mech on plumes, signifying impending doom. The primary configuration of the Nova is iconic, and one that most warriors, both Clan and Inner Sphere, will think of when the mech is brought up. Partially because its possible damage output, but mostly due to the astonishing heat issues it has even with the addition of 4 more double heatsinks. The 18 double heatsinks look at the possible 60 heat generated by the 12 ER medium lasers split between the left and right arms, and just put in the paperwork for an early retirement. In all seriousness, a full Alpha Strike left the Nova Prime at 24 heat at the standstill. But since there's no ammunition on the mech, really what it does is leave the mech with -4 movement points, a +4 modifier to fire the next turn, and possible shutdown avoidable on 8+. In a worst case scenario, when you really needed to make sure a target was dead right now, an Alpha Strike isn't the worst option. It's a risk, of course, but sometimes we just can't resist licking the raw cookie dough from the beater paddle. The Blackhawk's pilot targeted Harvison's Black Knight. All 6 of the extended range medium lasers built into the mech's right wrist blazed away, but the shots went low, burning a line in the Golden Meadow 10 meters from the Comstar mech. One of the lasers in the other arm sent a shaft of ruby light stabbing at the Black Knight's head. The diagnostic icons in the corner of the view painted the mech's head red, but pilot status remained green. Harvison fired back with the particle projection cannon built into the Hawk's right arm, and the large laser mounted into its right chest. The large laser's green beam missed high, but the PPC's cobalt beam drilled straight into the center of the clan mech's torso. Half-melted armor plates dropped away, leaving a blackened scar on the Blackhawk's chest. When the Nova first saw battle, it proved to be quite effective against the astonished and inadequately prepared forces from Clan Fire Mandrill on the planet Foster, which is just a couple of jumps from Tasha. The combination of medium mechs spewing laser bolts like a Pink Floyd light show down at the planetarium and leaping battle armor devastated the Fire Mandrills and proved the Hell's Horses were onto something with this Omnimech. Unlike some of the other Omnimechs, which were jealously guarded by their creating clans, the Nova was sold, traded, or otherwise procured by most of the other clans over the coming decades. By the beginning of Operation Revival, the Nova could be found across the clan tumens. Unfortunately for both Clan Hell's Horses and the Nova, the Tasha Mechworks ended up the target of Clan Ghost Bear's expansion plans. The production lines were named in a trial of possession in November of 2921, and the Khan of Hell's Horses, Aaron Cobb, was determined not to lose the vital industrial site. When he bid an entire galaxy in defense of the Mechworks, it was a surprise to the Ghost Bears. The trial took place in the jungles and oxygen-rich atmosphere of Tasha, which added an additional threat to anyone who had to abandon their mech or vehicle without respiration gear. The fighting was intense, and though the Hell's Horses did everything they could to drag the trial out with delaying tactics and ambushes, ultimately the Ghost Bears were able to push through the defensive lines and claim the Mechworks. It turned out to be a fateful day, not just for the Nova, which was no longer produced at the site under Clan Ghost Bear control, but also for Clan Hell's Horses, which had to completely rethink their tactical doctrine due to the loss of much of their battlemech production capability. Without new Nova production, the future of the mech was in doubt. On his flank, a Nova rose on its jump jets and landed at his same relative depth on the crater's slope. The Nova pilot must also have figured out that holding the high ground was the key. Trent toggled through the battle computer readout until he saw that the other mech was configured in its primary mode, mounting a dozen ER medium lasers and the heat sinks to help support them. Getting in too close was going to be the doom of him. Of course, like with any good Omnimech, there are some interesting alternate configurations which inform us about how the mech was frequently used in battle. For example, the alternate configuration A of the Nova relied upon 2 ERPPCs split between the arms as primary damage dealers. Able to strike for 2 15-point shots fairly consistently before heat becomes an issue made the Nova a dangerous 50-ton mech. It could hit way above its weight and had the agility necessary to avoid being pinned down by other mediums and lights. A medium pulse laser in the left torso was the only other weapon, but interestingly, 2 anti-missile systems along with a ton of ammunition for them was added to further improve the mech's durability. While the total overall Alpha Strike damage is significantly lower than the primary configuration, the concentration of that damage along with the ability to pump it out consistently makes the difference. Personally, if I had to choose between the two, I think I'd go with the A configuration for most missions. If you're looking for something more flexible, the Nova Configuration B features an eclectic mixture of weapons, which could be quite fun. The primary weaponry consists of a large pulse laser in the left arm and an Ultra AC-5 autocannon in the right arm fed by 1 ton of ammunition. At short range, an emotional support ER small laser was installed into the right torso, and a pair of standard machine guns were added to the left torso along with 1 ton of ammunition. While not terrible, the B configuration has trouble justifying its existence beyond perhaps a hunter of weaker battle mechs, tanks, and infantry. The possible Alpha Strike at point-blank range is just 29 if everything hits and you double fire that UAC-5. At least heat generation isn't an issue. I don't think I've ever used the B configuration in battle, as there seem to be much better options out there for most situations I can think of. If I had to give it a score, it would receive 2.5 shrugs. Moving on to the configuration C, the star of the show was the left arm-mounted Gauss rifle fed by just a single ton of ammunition. Backing it up in the right torso was a small pulse laser and a short-range missile 4 rack in the left torso fed by a single ton of ammunition. Now I did throw some shade at the configuration B, so to be fair I should probably pick on the C a little bit as well. I do not understand this build when the configuration A exists. The Gauss rifle dominates the build, yet has only 8 shots, severely limiting the duration that Nova C can remain combat effective. Not even the fluff can justify the C's existence with a contrived explanation. The Nova Configuration D was the last of the 2870 originals, and it departs from any of the previous builds by embracing a fire support role. The right arm mounted long-range missile 20 rack was fed by 2 tons of ammunition, which were also stored in the arm. This might be a good point to remind people that the Clan Omnimechs come with a built-in case, so the ammunition in the arm is actually a better plan than packing it into the side torso next to the XL engine. On the other side of the mech, a left arm mounted LB-5X autocannon was fed by 2 tons of ammunition, also stored along with the weapon. The range of the LB-5X is actually longer than the LRMs, so the pairing works to add just a little bit more firepower and possibility for chasing criticals with those LB cluster munitions. Overall, I'm okay with the D configuration. If you had the need for a fire support mech and had a Nova laying around, it's perfectly functional. I'd prefer a 3rd ton of LRM ammunition, but that would require pulling either a ton of the LB-5X ammo or rethinking the autocannon entirely. For the better part of the morning, he had been trading pot shots with the Hell's Horses Supernova, so named because it was, for all intents and purposes, a bigger and more powerful version of the Nova. Its major weaknesses against its smaller cousin was speed. Ben's Nova was 60% faster, and he could move in, strike, and pull back with relative ease. The game was becoming wearisome though. Because his quarry outranged Ben with extended range large lasers against Ben's mediums, it was difficult for him to draw the Supernova anywhere it did not want to go. It wasn't until 3050 that another official configuration was ID'd. The Nova S embraced pulse laser technology with the installation of 6 medium pulse lasers evenly split between the arms. Able to lash out to 12 hexes at improved accuracy automatically makes this configuration a danger to any target that relies upon speed to survive. The addition of an active probe in the head along with an anti-missile system in the center torso further backs up this configuration's role as a hunter of light and small things. Finally, to add insult to injury, 4 standard machine guns were added to the mech, split between the left and right torsos. All were fed by a half ton of ammunition on the left torso. The 14 double heat sinks do a good job of keeping the mech cool, even while firing all 6 medium pulse lasers on the run. It can only build up heat if firing while also jump jetting, and even then it's a minor issue. I'm a big fan of the Nova S, and I think it would be incredibly useful as support for heavier battle mechs in a star or as backup in a lighter star. In 3054, the configuration E of the Nova was a demonstration of how the advanced tactical missile launcher system could empower a mech to act as both fire support as well as a close-range powerhouse. For a mech like the Nova, which already had a reputation for being a generalist, the ATM was perfect. In the case of the Nova E, the ATM-12 in the right arm was fed by 6 tons of ammunition. Depending on what ammunition was chosen, the Nova E could consistently offer very long-range fire support for longer than most battles last. With a more balanced approach, the Nova E could drain its extended-range ammunition before closing in on a target and unleashing the high-explosive rounds. In addition to the ATM-12, 3 ER medium lasers were added to the left arm for mid- and short-range firepower. I'm a fan of the Nova E configuration because it really leans into the generalist role as a mech that could be useful in a wide variety of situations. It's just powerful enough with the extended range missiles that ignoring it is foolhardy, but not so dedicated to that role that it can't punch back hard in a clinch. Now, it should come as no surprise that we would see a heavy laser configuration for a traditionally laser-focused Omnimech. The Nova H configuration was first spotted in 3059, and with great subtlety and finesse, they just crammed this thing with 10 medium-heavy lasers and 6 additional double heatsinks, and then went to lunch, I guess. The potential 100 damage alpha strike from all 10 medium-heavy lasers is eye-opening, though it comes at some significant caveats. The first is the incredibly short range of the laser, 9 hexes at the most, and a +1 modifier to accuracy. And of course, the heat generated in the process. A full alpha strike generates 70 heat, which means if the 20 double heatsinks were all intact and working, the Nova H should end the round at 30 heat into the red, the magic number for an automatic shutdown. It could be avoided on a +8 roll if you don't fire one of the lasers, but good luck resisting that temptation in the moment. The H is an odd duck configuration, and while I don't think I would ever field it personally, I know there are a lot of rabid heavy laser fans out there, so I won't talk smack about them. You win this round. Enjoy your Nova H.
Only a few missiles glanced off his Nova's armor as the mech's feet came down in front of the nearest carrier. Bin opened fire with 6 pulse lasers and 4 machine guns. LRM carriers were designed to hide and fire, as they've been doing quite effectively just moments ago. Lightly armored and slow-moving, the vehicle had no chance against the full firepower of a Clan Nova. The carrier was literally torn to shreds, its crew scrambling to leap out of the vehicle's hatches before its ammunition exploded, which it did in spectacular fashion.
In 3068, the Nova F configuration debuted with the new Hyper-Assault Gauss technology on display. It looks a lot like the Nova E, just with the ATM-12 replaced by a HAG-20 rifle. In practice, it's a similar effect, though some of the short-range punch is traded for more long-range impact. 18 shots for the HAG sit in the Nova's arm, and the 14 double heatsinks are more than capable of handling the rifles and all 3 ER medium lasers. It's a perfectly functional build and can be quite powerful, just watch that 2 hex minimum range for the HAG-20. Next up on the timeline was the Nova U configuration, which definitely earned some points for creativity with its loadout. Starting with the big guns, this configuration carried 3 medium-heavy lasers in the right arm. Backing those up at extremely short range were 3 micro-pulse lasers in the left arm and 8 machine guns split between the left and right torso. As cool as that is, this gets more interesting. The U config also carries an ECM suite in the head, a light active probe in the left torso, and 2 1-ton liquid storage tanks split between the torsos. This might be a tad mysterious if not for the inclusion of the spot welder unit in the right arm. The combination of the storage tanks and spot welder tells us this configuration was likely for use in low or zero-G environments where the jump jets could use the additional fuel and the mech could weld plating back together on spaceships. This mech cries out for some use in a Mechwarrior Destiny scenario. Oh, before we go, the U configuration also carries a sword in the left arm, possibly for utilitarian reasons like hacking wrecked or bent structures and plating, but a sword is a sword, and who knows when you might need to whack something mech-shaped. Very cool. Obviously, the Nova U is incredibly niche with its loadout, but I like it anyway, and not just because of the 8 machine guns and the sword. One of the most notable mech warriors who piloted a Nova wasn't from Clan's House Horses, but actually a Jade Falcon. Diana Pride, the daughter of the legendary Aiden Pride, became a bit of a legend on her own right after becoming the first freebirth warrior to earn a Clan Jade Falcon blood name. In her final trial, Diana faced a skilled warrior named Leaf, who piloted his Black Lanner. They faced off against each other on Ironwind, deep within a cave complex with a variety of hydrothermal and petroleum geologic features. Each barrage she triggered, each stream of laser fire appeared to hit somewhere on the Black Lanner. Leaf's counterattack was effective enough, but time and position were working in Diana's favor. Her mech was advancing on the Black Lanner, forcing it backward through the sheer impetus of her attack. Alongside the Black Lanner, an especially high geyser of flame erupted, almost to elbow level with the mech. Behind him, a new waterfall came down, opened up by the impact of a PPC hit. The liquid gushing out was particularly dark, darker than Styx, where the oily liquid was diluted with underground streams of water. Though it was close, Diana won her fight and earned her blood name within her trusty Nova. Following her trial, Diana Pride was thrust into the conflict with Clan Steel Viper. She fought alongside the Falcon Guard and even earned a line in the Remembrance after defeating Steel Viper Khan Paragard Zalman, which stalled the Viper invasion of Clan Jade Falcon worlds. By the early 3070s, Diana Pride achieved the rank of Star Colonel, though her life was cut short following a Word of Blake attack on Ark Royal in 3073. Quickly, the two of them, with the Turkina Keshik and the first Falcon Striker cluster, headed there. As they approached, Martha's sensors told her that the fight had been devastating. A lone Nova stood protectively over a fallen Timberwolf, with what appeared to be an army of defeated Steel Vipers laying toppled and scattered all around the single standing mech. In the same year of Diana Pride's passing, clan leadership decided they would honor her memory by creating a production line for the Nova which would breathe new life into the antique battlemech design. Olivetti weaponry on Sudetan put in the effort, and soon the Nova was seen not just within the Falcon Tumen, but also the Hell's Horses, which never lost their love for the battlemech. In 3092, the Nova Configuration G provided a unique use of the available pod space, and by unique I mean frustratingly bad. The mech's primary weapons consisted of two medium improved heavy lasers put between the side torsos and a proto-mech AC-8 autocannon. At close range, 7 ER small lasers in the left arm offered a fun light show experience. Bring your own glow sticks. The AC-8 can only fire out to 10 hexes, and that's the longest range weapon you have, so if you're going with the Config G, you're going to want to be sneaky and get close. All of the weapons are aided by a targeting computer at least, located in the right torso. The Config G clearly has a limited mission profile, but I can see how some might enjoy it for the ability to do a considerable amount of damage at very short range. The G would do well in an urban environment or rugged terrain where line of sight is limited. Just 2 years later, the Nova I configuration hit the scene with a more traditional loadout. The mech's primary weapon was an ER-PPC in the right arm, which provided a tried and true punch. Backing it up at short range were 5 medium improved lasers in the left arm. They could reach out to 9 hexes for 10 damage apiece, but for 7 heat generated and the possible explosion should they be struck during combat. The 15 additional double heat sinks help mitigate the heat generation, though a full alpha strike including the ER-PPC would still leave the Nova at 12 plus into the red. It would slow you down the next turn and make another shot less accurate, but it's not unmanageable if you really need to lay down some damage right now rather than later. Following the Nova I configuration, there's a considerable wait for the next official one. In 3128, the Nova J config was spotted, which highlighted Streak LRM technology with the installation of the LRM-15 version of it in the right arm along with 2 tons of ammunition. 16 shots would be plenty considering the Streak would only allow it to fire with the lock. In fact, I bet for all but the longest of battles, the Nova J config is likely not going to run out of ammunition before taking the field or itself being destroyed. In the left arm, an ER-PPC was installed, which further boosted the Nova's ability to hammer targets at long range. It can even do so consistently, as these standard 14 double heat sinks can handle any heat generated except for the longest of jump jet flights while alpha striking. I'm fond of the Nova J as it's a good way to lean into the fire support role without ending up considerably less effective quickly into the battle. Next in line is the Nova K configuration in 3134, which saw the mech's first official implementation of a rotary autocannon. The rotary AC-2 was added to the left arm, which promised a considerable rate of fire out to an impressive distance. Though the damage was somewhat limited due to the fact that it's still an AC-2, I know there are some big fans of the rotary weapons out there. The RAC-2 was balanced on the right arm by the installation of an ER large laser, which could match the max range of the autocannon while also not relying upon ammunition. At the mid and short range, the two ER medium lasers split between the side torsos provided some added punch. The 2 tons of RAC-2 ammunition were plenty for the weapon, and the heat generation for the K configuration is minuscule. If you're fond of the rotary autocannons, this could be a decent option. In that same year, the Nova L configuration was spotted, which offered another new piece of technology not previously seen on the platform. The 2 large improved heavy lasers were split between the arms and offered a tantalizing 16 damage per shot. The new technology was found in the 2 plasma cannons, also split between the arms. At the cost of generating 7 heat for the user, the plasma cannon spews out a plasmified round of plastic which splashes a target with intense heat. For heat-synced targets, that can add up to 2d6 additional heat that turn. Each of the Config L plasma cannons were fed by just a single ton of ammunition. The flaw in this configuration is found in the lack of additional heat sinks, with just 14 firing both improved heavy lasers while at a standstill sends the mech immediately 8+ into the red. The Mechwarrior who chooses this configuration is going to need to be savvy with managing the mech's heat in order to maximize damage output. Very briefly, the Nova X configuration was created in 3137 as a mixed Intersphere Clan Tech chassis, only due to the installation of a TS-EMP cannon into that left arm. For those unfamiliar, this ill-conceived weapon can potentially shut down a targeted mech based upon some dice rolling. Full disclosure, I am really not a fan of game elements that completely take away a player's agency. While it's fun to spew inferno fire or plasma onto a target, that target can usually still act in all but the most extreme circumstances. Few things are less fun for a player than having to sit there and do nothing through an additional turn while you are being pummeled by an opponent. Okay, that's my TS-EMP rant over. The X configuration also carries 6 ER medium lasers in the right arm, which is reminiscent of the primary configuration's loadout from way back in the day. The 18 double heat sinks are fine, but as is often the case with Novas, heat management will be required to keep your cockpit from smelling like a locker room after the big game. In 3140, the Nova R configuration highlighted a couple of new technologies in a build that promised to run roughshod over infantry, light vehicles, and possibly even that neighbor who needs to run his very loud air compressor for hours every morning. Sorry, what was I talking about? Oh yes, the R configuration. The mech's primary weapons were 4 medium re-engineered lasers placed into the right arm, which offered 6 damage out to 9 hexes for 6 heat. In the left arm, 6 anti-personnel Gauss rifles were installed along with 2 tons of ammunition. This offered up the fun thought of laying waste to platoons of soldiers and light vehicles which might get in the Nova's way. The last new element for the R config was the addition of a supercharger to the center torso, which could push the Nova's movement profile up to 5-10-5 when needed. Overall, the R configuration is an interesting, though obviously niche loadout. For a specific infiltration mission where a command tent needed to be cleared, this could be a good pick. Finally, our last official Nova configuration is the Nova T, which shows up in our timeline in 3142. Unfortunately, it's not one of those Dawn of the IlClan variants which wows the crowd. Its weaponry consists of 12 medium chemical lasers split evenly between the left and right arms. The benefit of the chemical lasers is their low heat, just 2 per laser. Unfortunately, they also require ammunition, which the T configuration has just 4 tons. That's 120 shots split between 12 lasers. For those of you who, like me, took public school math classes, that's just 10 shots per laser. So we're left with what is possibly doing up to 60 damage 10 times before the T configuration needs to flee the battlefield to reload. While I get what they were going for with this, it fails to meet the standards set by the Nova primary configuration. It's just not a Nova I would take into a fight when there are so many better options out there across the timeline. Now, I don't think my out-of-control ego and wildly inflated sense of self-importance would let this moment go without an attempt at a totally non-canon and unofficial Mechfrog configuration. Behold the Nova 1MF in all of its glory. Sorry, no plasma this time. My goal for the 1MF was to create an updated general-purpose Nova that could do well in the IlClan era. The primary weapon is the tried-and-true large pulse laser located in the right arm. Backing it up in the mid-range were a couple of ER medium lasers split between the side torsos. At short and extremely short range, an SRM rack in the left arm and a micro pulse laser offer a warm welcome on those cold winter evenings. The last addition was a supercharger to the center torso to help get the Nova where it needs to be and when it needs to be there. The added agility is a nice bonus for what is a pretty standard design. It may not be flashy or put up insane numbers, but I'd happily take the 1MF most of the time as a general purpose 50-ton Omnimech. Now, they say that the highest form of flattery is imitation, so it's no surprise to me that the Nova was the subject of considerable efforts by others to create their own versions of the mech. The wreckage on Luthien was still warm when scientists and engineers from the Draconis Combine got to work trying to sort out clan technology, specifically the Omnimech tech, which had become infamous in the previous months of the invasion. One of the products of this extensive effort was the BHKU-0 Black Hawk KU, named after the Inner Sphere designation for the Nova. This 60-ton Inner Sphere Omnimech looked very much like its inspiration, like see you in a courtroom with all of your lawyers similar. Though it was 10 tons heavier than the Nova, the Black Hawk KU could only boast of 17 tons of pod space, just one more than its inspiration. Though it was more heavily armored and could match the Nova's standard cooling and movement profile, it was obvious that the limitations of this Inner Sphere technology would continue to plague the design. Another flattering imitator of the Nova was Callan Industries' Penetrator. It weighed in at 75 tons and featured an all-energy weapon loadout. Though slower than the Nova, it did have jump jets and could at least partially fill in that generalist role for Inner Sphere forces that fielded it. Finally, in 3073, Clan House Horses sought to recapture lightning in a bottle with the creation of the Blackhawk, a simplified non-Omnimech version of the classic design. Though this mech could get its own video someday, it's worth noting the Blackhawk was given a blended missile and energy weapon design rather than trying to mimic the primary config's all-laser loadout. Mech warriors of the Inner Sphere are likely to see more of this design, as it apparently was produced by Clan Diamond Shark, later Sea Fox, who were willing to sell it to anyone without restrictions. Looking at the Nova, I think the general purpose mission is part of its appeal and success, both in the lore and on the tabletop. There are quite a few good standard configurations, and the frame itself is flexible for a large number of homebrew builds. The hulking design is more alien than man, and I appreciate that as a change of pace from so many man-in-armor style battle mechs that are out there. While it is rarely mentioned before mechs like the Stormcrow or Shadowcat, the Nova is what we in the education sector call a quality producer. It does the work and gets stuff done. Do you have a favorite Nova configuration that has served you well in the past? Do you have a homebrew configuration that you prefer? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep this conversation going. Thank you as always for coming out today as we discuss the Nova in all of its glory. I'd like to also thank Mini Frog for volunteering and doing his first voice acting in one of the novel quotes. He did an amazing job and put in the effort to make sure he did the text justice. If you haven't already, hitting that like and subscribe button will make sure that YouTube algorithm is happy, and as a result, you're much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. Going the extra step and becoming a channel member or supporting on Ko-fi will go a long way to making sure I can keep this venture going. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to do my part to support the BattleTech community. With that said, have a great week, please keep being positive and go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.